Hello everybody, and welcome to my first vlog of 2020. This one will actually be the last of my vlogs about my small Leica collection, and in fact it doesn't actually really consist of a Leica comparison. On this one I'm going to compare my IIIb that you've seen before with a rather interesting copy. The copy isn't Russian, it isn't Japanese, it's actually British. And before we continue with why this camera came about, that is the camera. It's actually a British made Reid 3. I've got some notes here. The reason why this camera came about is quite interesting. When World War II broke out, I think the British government or the War Department, one or the other, decided that the typical British camera British made camera wasn't really ideal for the sort of work they had in mind. What they wanted was a compact, small 35mm camera. Maybe they were prepared to go to medium format, but the output of British camera manufacturers at that time tended to be rather specialist cameras, studio cameras and things like that. There were a few medium format cameras of quality, but a lot of the British output tended to be, what shall we say, for the budget market. There's always going to be exceptions to that. I'm sure that some people now are sitting at home thinking of, well, I can name a few British camera manufacturers that could have made cameras like that. But most of the 35mm cameras were German. And it appears that this is what they wanted during the war, probably because of their small compact size. And basically what happened was the government of the time, which was a coalition government, decided that they were going to ask the public for their cameras, and they advertised in the press for cameras like Leicas, Contaxes, what else was there, maybe Voigtlanders, I can't remember, and I think they might have wanted a few larger format cameras or medium format cameras, but nothing any bigger. They tended to want small cameras. And what they did, they asked people to send their cameras in to specific dealers. One of them I've seen the advertisement for, and it is online, was Wallace Heaton, that was a London-based dealer of that time. And I think what happened, you could have your camera assessed and then a price agreed, and they kept the camera and they sent you your money instead, your money in return rather. And also I believe that the British government did get some Leicas. It sounds quite odd, doesn't it? They were actually buying the enemy's products, but they got some Leicas via Sweden, which would make sense because Sweden was a neutral country. And they also got some from the States as well. But they still wanted people to help with the war effort by selling them their cameras, their high quality cameras. I mean, these cameras were never cheap. So you've got to be pretty patriotic, I think, to sell off your Leica or your Contax or whatever. But people certainly did. And what happened though, after the war, the British government, along with the Americans, I think they decided that they were going to produce their own quality 35mm camera. And the story goes that I think both British and American intelligence went to Vestlar. The Vestlar was in the British section. The Zeiss factory wasn't, it was in the Russian section, and that got totally stripped. and all the Zeiss tooling went to Russia, and eventually reappeared as the Kiev range. But Leica were luckier in that their factory carried on producing cameras, but they did get a visit from the British government, British intelligence, I should say, and also, I believe, the Americans. And if you go to the L39 website, which is a very, very informative website regarding Leicas, then they've also got a section on these cameras, and most of the information I've got has actually come from that website. But they visited the Lights factory, and they took a lot of microfilm of the various different Leica drawings. I think they took the drawings for the 3B, which is this one here, and they also took drawings of the what was then the current model, the 3C, and also the Leica 1, which was what I tend to consider as the scientific camera. The Leica, the one didn't have a range finder or a viewfinder. It was basically a body, the sort of thing you would attach to a microscope. But you could, with additional fittings, there were two accessory shoes. You could have a viewfinder in one shoe and a rangefinder in the other, so you could use it as a conventional camera. But they took drawings of those three cameras, or rather they took photographs on microfilm. But I think one of the problems was that when the microfilm was then looked at, nobody could tell which drawing was for what. And so they returned, and I think on the return they actually took either copies of the drawings or the drawings themselves for the three different models. And what happened was that eventually, as far as the Americans are concerned, they produced the American Leica copy called the Cardon, which is Kardon, and that's well worth Googling. But I don't want to cover that one because I'm just concerned with this, the three. And what happened with the British drawings? They also actually toured the factory and looked at the production methods. And if you go to that website I've mentioned, there's also another link there to the report that British intelligence made about the Westlar factory. But anyway, the British government approached a company in Leicestershire, or in Leicester actually. The company was Reid and Segrist. Now, Reid and Segrist were not camera manufacturers. They manufactured navigation equipment and aircraft instruments. They also had another factory in New Malden in Surrey, where they made trainer aircraft. So it was really a company that was very much associated with the aviation industry. But basically, they were precision engineers. And they had the drawings, and for reasons I don't know, rather than produce the 3C, they decided that they would make a copy of the pre-war 3B. There are different construction methods between the 3B and the 3C, which I've covered in an earlier upload. And so maybe the way the 3B was manufactured suited the way they went about things. They also had to convert the metric drawings to imperial. Apparently that was because their machining, their equipment for their tooling and so on was obviously designed for imperial standards and not metric, and that apparently would have been very time consuming. And I was talking to a chap yesterday who was a retired engineer, and he said that it would have been quite a task to do that. Now, the first production ones of these cameras, which were known as the Reid 3, came on the market in the early 50s, and it was this version, rather a bit like the way Leica go on and do things. The way in which the model numbers appeared wasn't sort of altogether logical, because the first one to appear was the Reid 3. There was a Reid 2 and the Reid one, which was a copy of the Leica one, and they appeared much later. They appeared in the late 50s. This one is the, if you like, I suppose, the commonest variation of the Reid 3, because it has the two flash connectors here. The top one is marked E for electronic. I don't know whether you can see that, and the bottom one is marked B for bulb. And the very first ones weren't synced for flash, and I think they are slightly more collectible. And this is, I think, the, if you like, you can't say they're actually common, but I think this is the most, what shall we say, if you find a Reid, it's probably more likely to be one of these rather than ones with the ones without the connectors here are slightly more sought after. These cameras, though, are far from common. In fact, there are believed to be only about 1,600 of these threes made between 1951 and 1964. The production did go on for that long. However, the last cameras were probably constructed from parts by either Marston & Hurd or a company called A.W. Young. I don't know when this one was produced. The problem is that all the records of that sort of thing have been lost. So it's a difficult one to actually say. I'd like to think it was probably maybe late 50s. But I don't know. I was talking to a very knowledgeable chap at a local auction house quite recently about this, and he told me that all the records have been destroyed, or at least they've been lost. And so, you know, nobody really knows. These cameras, as I've said, they're very sought after. They're very expensive. This cost me a lot more money than the 3B did, and it's because, well, there weren't so many made, and they are considered to be at least as good as, but if not better, put together than the Leica. Somebody did ask me once on a forum, how does it feel to operate it? And well, it feels exactly like a 3B, which isn't too surprising, is it really? If they're put together, obviously the 3B doesn't have any flash sync there, but this is obviously a pre-war camera, and the Reid's a post-war camera, but they are very, very, very similar. The little details like the film advance, the knurling is slightly different on the Reid, and the knurling on the diopter adjuster is also slightly different as well. But really, I think that's cutting hairs. Like the Leica, the Reid loads in from the bottom of the body, the base, and this one also has the Taylor Hobson f2 lens, which is marked as again in imperial standards, it's marked as a 2-inch focal length, which is for all intents and purposes exactly the same as a 5-centimeter lens. This lens is in really nice condition. I've read somewhere that sometimes the back elements on these can fog, and not through what shall we say, not through evaporating lubricant or anything like that, but from actually an alteration in the chemistry of the glass. I can't really see that, but apparently it does happen. I can say though that this lens, which I will remove, is in extremely nice condition. Take that from the body, and well, you can see that there's the iris leaves and so on. I can't see any marks at all in the glass, and there are the rear elements as well. Just hold it like that. I think the phone's picking up the details there. So it did cost a lot of money. I'm not going to say how much it cost. It did cost quite a bit, but I'm quite glad I got it. I have put film through it. It works very nicely. I've only ever put one film through. The exposures and so on were perfect. I do intend to use it again, but I actually never thought I'd be in a position to get hold of one of these, but I have, and it's no different to a Leica really. It feels the same. It operates in exactly the same way. And what I will do though, I'll take the base plate off. There, incidentally, there's the inside of it. Very, very clean. It is a nice one. It's in nice nick. And just fire the shutter off. I'll turn the camera back round this way, and that's at quite a slow speed. I'll reset it. Yeah, that's at 160. Let's put it round to about, I'll do it at 500th of a second. Shoot it there. And well, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like a Leica actually, which is probably not too surprising. I'll just put the lens on off camera. And collapse it back again for now and put the cap on. Quite a nice lens cap as well. What I will do, I'll take the base off because it's actually got a transfer on the base plate. Oh, before I show you the base plate, that's what the camera looks like. Some of these actually, I believe, left the factory without this plate on. So what I mean why that was, I don't know. Where in the production run that happened, I don't know. Maybe it was quite late on. Maybe these when these cameras were being constructed by from parts from another company, maybe they run out of those parts. I don't know. I really don't know. That's just guesswork on my part. But this is quite nice though, because in the base plate there, if I just turn that round, hope you can read that. That's the suppliers, Westminster Photographic of 21 Cheapside EC2. But going back to the history of these cameras, when they first appeared in the country, these were actually more expensive than the current Leica, and of course they were an unknown quantity. I mean, when just after the war, there was, I believe there was quite a heavy import tax on anything from abroad, and that included Leicas. But even with, and I think the import duty did drop a bit eventually, but even with the import duty on, it turned out that you could buy a Leica for less than one of these. So you can appreciate that a lot of people, I mean, this was an unknown quantity at the time, people really didn't know how good or bad it was. Turned out they're very, very good. But I suppose you can understand the logic. Why buy a copy when you can buy the real thing for, I think it was probably about £5 less. And that £5 back in the early 50s was a considerable amount of money. So you can see the logic in that. But they did sell. Not obviously in great numbers, but the very first production, I should point out, of these cameras was for the military and the police, and they only came out on the open market once those particular contracts had been fulfilled. And they did sell. There were other lenses made for them. This is I never mentioned this. This is a Taylor Hobson lens, very well respected lens maker, also from Leicester as well. And I should show you the plate, shouldn't I? There you go. Look, Reid, Reid and Segrist Limited, Leicester, England, and this lens, which tended to be I think this was the lens that was retailed with them. The history of this lens, though, what went on, there's all sorts of stories online about these. It is a very good lens. I've had this via a Leica adapter on one of my digital cameras, and the results were pretty stunning. So anyway, you can appreciate, though, that the camera buyer probably would fight a bit shy of buying one of these, unless of course you were stoically British and you wanted a British camera, and I think probably that there was that patriotism there then. What happened was, when production stopped in 1964, I think that was when total production stopped. As I've said, there were two other companies, A.W. Young and Marston and Hurd, that were associated with these cameras. I don't know which one actually, or both of them, may have been constructing these from spare parts. So when the actual factory of Reid and Segrist stopped producing them, I don't know. It's important to remember, though, that Reid and Segrist were not, this might sound an odd thing to say, but they were not camera manufacturers. They manufactured cameras, but they were not a recognised camera manufacturer. They were instrument manufacturers, and these were produced at the behest of the British government. So I hope you appreciate what I mean by that. They didn't really sort of develop the cameras a lot further, but it's easy for me to say that because all I'm really doing is surmising, but it was almost like, I suppose, a sideline, really. There were other lenses made for these, though, and I've seen a few quite recently. In fact, I bid on one at an auction, and they were made by Dalmayer, and apparently only the ones which received extra collimation or setting up were engraved with not only the Dalmayer, but on the barrel somewhere, on the side of the barrel, there was the Reid logo was engraved as well. So in other words, they only carried the Reid name, I believe, if they passed this extra high specification. And again, that was for, I think they were originally for government use. I did go to an auction. There's an auction house in Dudley in the West Midlands, Aston's, who regularly have camera auctions, and they're about 8 miles from where I'm recording this. And I went to their last auction late last year, and the reason I went is because there was a collection of Reid stuff being auctioned off. It was known as the John Vincent collection. And I had a number of, I didn't look at the Reid cameras because I've got one and I can't afford another one, but I had quite a good look at quite a few other bits and bobs that were being sold off. And this included a couple of lens hoods that looked a little bit like the ventilated lens hoods that you often see being used on Leica Summicrons. The ones with the elongated slots, so that you can still use the viewfinder. I'm sure you know what I mean. I've got one. Well, I haven't got one. I've actually got a very nice Chinese copy somewhere about. But anyway, I think these were only ventilated. I might be imagining this, but I think these have only got the ventilation slots on the one side, so that the other side acts as a pure hood. So I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on that one. But I think this has got about 3 slots, but just on the viewfinder side. And these were engraved with Reid. And I thought, well, I'm going to come back with something from this auction, hopefully, that's got a Reid connection. There were boxes and boxes of spares for these. There was even a brass plaque from the factory, and that read, what was it now? It had got their name on the front, but by that, this was dated 1954, I think, or something like that. No, sorry, it wasn't. Beg your pardon. I'm looking at my notes. I've misread that. But the auction included things like spare parts and spare Taylor Hobson bits, but not a sort of enough to make a camera, if that makes sense. And there was also a box of, there were several different lots which were literally just parts. And this, I think this John Vincent must have had quite a connection with the factory. But there were these 2 lens hoods anyway, and I thought, well, I'm going to bid on those, and I'm prepared to go up to about 50 quid each one. And to cut a long story short, and I'm not joking, but with buyer's commission, these 2 lens hoods as one lot went for £2,000. So that's £1,000 per hood. So, I mean, obviously, whoever bought them was a very, very keen Reid fan, and somebody with, well, you know, quite a decent sized wallet, because you know, that's quite something to pay that sort of money. £1,000 per lens hood. It's a lot of money. So I actually came away from the auction without anything. I had to leave in the end because I was parked in a car park, and I didn't want to end up with a ticket. There was another camera there. As I said, this was probably the best Reid. It wasn't purely. They weren't selling purely Reid stuff, but quite a few of the lots were Reid stuff. There was other stuff as well. If you interested in camera auctions, and Aston's at Dudley, it's well worth going on to have a look at their auctions. They also auction. I think they have about 2 camera auctions per year, but they also auction toys as well. They're a bit specialist like that. Anyway, if you just look at Aston's auctions, I'm sure you'll find their website, and you might even be able to find what some of these lots went for at the last auction, which was late last year. But there was some pretty interesting stuff there, particularly this large collection. I mean, it must have been the biggest auction of Reid stuff anywhere, and clearly this gentleman John Vincent must have had connection with the company. There was also a brass plaque from the office, and it also said that by this brass plaque also said that the company was part of Leica, and I think that Leica got hold of the company in 1954. Now Leica, we all tend to, if you think about Leica, you tend to think about records and so on, but Leica Decca was really a big electronics company, and they made radar equipment and all sorts of things, and so probably an aircraft instrument maker would have been ideal for their portfolio. So anyway, that's the Reid. Some of these, as I've said, the early ones didn't have the flash sync here. There was no flash sync. And the last ones of these that were made, it appears that they'd run out of the parts to apply or to include the slow speed shutter dial here, and so they weren't fitted with that, and they were sold as the Reid 2, and they appeared around about 1959, and they are rare. And the Reid 1, which was like the Leica one, more of a scientific instrument or a scientific camera, that appeared about 1958. 500 of those were believed to have been made mainly for the military, and if you come across one of those, there's a very good chance you'll find the military mark on them, which looks like a sort of an arrow. Again, I would recommend, if you want to know all about these cameras, look on the L39 Cambase website, and there you will find a link to the British government report that they made when British intelligence visited the factory. So, as I've said, that both cameras very, very similar in appearance. You can see how bright the paintwork on this one still is. It doesn't look as though it's had an awful lot of use. It is a nice one, and quite rare. Oh, and another thing I did mean to mention, at that auction at Aston's in Dudley, they had a prototype. I don't know what that went for. As I said, if you visit their website, you might still be able to find out. But it had an opening back, and that's why it was a prototype. So obviously, somebody somewhere must have had the idea of continuing the range and making improvements. But as it appears that that one with the opening back was literally a one-off, and that must have gone for a considerable amount of money. I should have actually had a look myself after, but I'd left by that time. So anyway, I think I've covered everything. There were apparently of the variants, there were only about in total. In total, there are only about 2,500 of these cameras made, and of this, the Reid 3, some 1,600. It is a very nice camera. As I said, I have run some film through it, and what I'll do is that one's set at 500, and the genuine article also is set at 500. So this is the Leica 3B, and this is the Reid 3. So I suppose that's one sort of comparison. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. This is my final Leica upload. You've seen all my collection of Leicas, and you've seen this particular copy, which is British, and it's considered to be actually, dare I say this, built to tighter tolerances than the Leica. Some people will love that comment, others maybe not. I was told that a lot of the internal parts, they're polished. There's no need for them to be polished, but they are, and that's because that's just the way that Reid and Segrist worked, making precision instruments. Unnecessary, I suppose, really. But that's the way it goes. But anyway, that is, I think, one of the most interesting of the Leica copies. And with the real thing perched just behind it. I think that makes quite a nice end to my vlogs about my Leica collection. I do intend to do some more about other cameras I've got. I might do one on the two Pentaxes I've got. I've got a Spotmatic 1 and the Spotmatic 2. Might do a vlog on those. I've also got nothing really as interesting as these, but I've quite enjoyed doing these vlogs, and I've quite enjoyed the response they've got, and I'm glad that a few people have taken the trouble to comment, and two gentlemen have actually even been interested enough to make comments. There's been I should have said there's plenty of views. You know, it's nearly everyone now has got over 100 views, which I know is nothing, but these will remain online for as long as YouTube care to put them online. And the two gentlemen have responded in actual making comments, and thank you, gentlemen. Sorry I can't offhand remember your nicknames, but thank you. And you know, if one or two more of you would like to make comments, I don't mind. You know, if they're negative comments, if they're criticisms, then you know, so be it. It's just nice to you know, hear your thoughts. A couple of the vlogs are over 100 people now, which I know isn't a lot. Some people will get that in probably a matter of going online for a few seconds. I say I'm new to this, I don't do any fancy editing. But anyway, I think I've covered everything. Don't forget, visit the L39 Cambase website, you can learn a lot about the Reid, and of course a lot about the different models of genuine Leicas. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon. Thank you very much.